Welcome back to the Joe Show on AFN, the Eagles serving America's best. I'm Sergeant Andre Clark, she's C-Dub, and on the phone we have a very special guest. We have Mr. John Fenscak. He's an NCIS agent at the Marshall Center, the Deputy Program Director for the Countering Organized Crime. Is that a unit, sir, or is that just like an agency that you got going on?
Well, at the Marshall Center we have several transnational programs, one of which is Countering Transnational Organized Crime. And that would be the program that I serve, with which I serve as the deputy director.
All right. So I understand you're an NCIS agent. So what is an NCIS agent doing at the Marshall Center?
That's a good question. Well, the NCIS mission is oriented towards preventing terrorism, protecting secrets, and reducing crime. Now, arguably, it's impossible to prevent terrorism and reduce crime unless you're working as part of an interagency team, a whole-of-government team, a regional or a global team. It all requires collaboration. In this age, the globalization brings a lot of wonderful things to the world, but there's a dark side. And there's a demonstrated relationship between transnational organized crime and international terrorism, and that threat demands collaboration on a global level and an interagency level. And that's what the Marshall Center is all about. The Marshall Center mission is all about building cooperative networks and building capacity across the globe, particularly as it pertains to transnational threats. So it's a kind of a natural fit to have a real-world law enforcement practitioner like myself with experience in combating terrorism in Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, combating transnational organized crime in East Africa and the Indian Ocean region, to serve as a faculty member here and kind of bring a real-world approach to these issues and combining it with the academic genius that exists here at the Marshall Center and working together as a team, both interagency in the United States and regionally and globally. So to be able to play a part in building networks at the Marshall Center and building capacity, that not only benefits the NCIS mission, it benefits the whole U.S. government approach to dealing with transnational threats and regional and global. To get in on the ground floor is absolutely critical to NCIS's success.
All right, that's very cool. Very cool to have an actual agent go in there and be able to teach. So I love it. When we return, we're going to talk about a couple of the workshops that Marshall Center has to offer. Welcome back to the Joe Show on AFN, the Eagles serving America's best. Now on the phone, we have Mr. John Fenscak, an NCIS agent at the Marshall Center. Sir, so we understand that the Marshall Center hosted a community of interest group workshop 2 weeks ago looking at fighting organized crime. So what is the community interest of the workshop?
Well, the community of interest is kind of a fancy way of renaming a workshop. So they're more or less synonymous with one another. Here at the Marshall Center, what we try and do, again, when we have our resident courses, we're establishing a network. We're establishing relationships between our participants and between participants and the faculty, both here at the Marshall Center in Garmisch and faculty that we bring in special to support our resident courses. Now, in order to maintain that network and facilitate its growth and its effectiveness, given the changing conditions around the world, we try and bring those alumni, our graduates from our resident courses, back on an intermittent basis in order to share lessons learned, success stories, identify new challenges and new approaches to dealing with those challenges. So this last workshop that we held associated with the Countering Transnational Organized Crime program was focused on countering illicit financial networks. What we find across all the transnational threats, be it cyber, terrorism, or international crime, is this common thread of following the money. In order for criminals and terrorists to be effective, they have to have a place to hide their money. They need to be able to access it in order to fund additional criminal or terrorist operations. And frankly, at least in the case of crime, they want to be able to put their hands on it to enjoy the proceeds. So if we can identify how they're hiding and moving those funds, and if we can disrupt their ability to use those funds or profit from them, and if we can, even better yet, recover those illicit funds and return them to the nations from which they were stolen, that's how we define success. So in this workshop, We were looking at ways to identify the unique challenges associated with what I just described and formulate policy and strategy to address those challenges.
All right, I like it. Like listening to you talk, sir, is like watching a movie. It's like or all the TV shows that you say. So you're like a real life superhero, doing all these things, tracking money, fighting terrorists, and all this other stuff. I love it, sir.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure. I mean, it's a wonderful opportunity again to be here at the Marshall Center and to see these senior leaders coming in with the intent of formulating policy and strategy to deal with these real threats that are affecting people, affecting their countries on a daily basis.
All right, so you know what? We're going to have more with our real-life superhero when we come back. Welcome back to the Joe Show on AFN, the Eagles serving America's best. Now on the phone we have Mr. John Fenscak, the NCIS agent at the Marshall Center. Now, sir, got a question for you. Have you ever had any success stories of alumni working together to solve a big case?
Oh, absolutely. And I tell you what, it's probably one of the most rewarding parts of the job is hearing about these successes and then sharing those lessons learned with participants and returning alumni so that maybe some of those principles can be applied and they can experience the same sort of success. So, for instance, just recently at this past workshop on combating financial flows, we heard from a participant alumni from Trinidad and Tobago who had recently participated in stopping about $500,000 of illicit funds being laundered in Trinidad Tobago, and his success, his agency's success, was largely dependent upon cooperation with the nation of Costa Rica. And in order to garner that cooperation, our graduate from Trinidad and Tobago contacted a colleague of his who had been a student with him at the Countering Transnational Organized Crime resident course in order to verify the validity of travel documents and other documents. Costa Rica was able to assist Trinidad and Tobago in an extremely timely fashion that is really only happens when there's trust between agencies and individuals. And that trust was built here at the Marshall Center. And as a result, that $500,000 in illicit funds was recovered. Another example from about a year ago, we had participants from Greece and Romania involved in countering narcotics trafficking. They worked together to stop over $220 million worth of heroin bound for Germany and Belgium. Again, based on a relationship forged during one of our resident courses and reinforced during one of these community of interest workshops.
All right, so bad guys, if you're listening, just know that when the countries work together, you have less likely of a chance for success. Sir, I want to thank you for being on the show. You've been awesome. I hope to hear from you again.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, keep listening to The Joe Show on AFN, the Eagles serving America's best.